London, 1845. The rain streaked down the carriage windows, transforming the passing London streets into a blur of grey. Nora Mills pressed her forehead against the cold glass, grateful that the weather matched her spirits. At 26, she had learned that invisibility was her greatest protection. Not literal invisibility, of course, but the practiced art of remaining unnoticed, unremarkable, and unmemorable. "We've arrived, Miss Mills," the driver announced as the carriage rolled to a stop before the imposing iron gates of Thornfield Manor. Nora gathered her modest belongings, a worn leather valise containing 2 serviceable gowns, several plain white collars, a Bible, and the letters of recommendation that had secured her this position. Each letter carefully crafted to highlight her skills while revealing nothing of her past. "Remember," she whispered to herself, "you are merely a shadow, a ghost. You exist only to teach, never to be seen." This was her 7th position as governess in 9 years. 7 households where she had perfected the art of fading into the background. 7 places where she had taught children their letters and sums while ensuring the adults barely registered her presence. This skill had become both her prison and her protection. The manor's housekeeper, Mrs. Winters, a severe woman with silver-streaked hair pulled tightly beneath her cap, greeted her with a cursory nod. "You're the new governess, then?" "Miss Mills?" "Yes, ma'am. His Grace is rarely in residence. The child is your sole responsibility. Lady Charlotte is 7 years old and in desperate need of discipline. The Duke's late wife spoiled the girl terribly." Nora nodded, keeping her eyes downcast as she had trained herself to do. Eye contact invited conversation, and conversation invited questions about her past. "You'll take your meals in your room, except when Lady Charlotte dines in the nursery. His Grace prefers the staff to be discreet in their movements throughout the house." "I understand perfectly," Nora replied, relief washing over her. This arrangement suited her completely. The less she was seen, the safer she remained. Mrs. Winters led her through the grand entrance hall with its soaring ceiling and marble floors, up the main staircase, and down a long corridor. "The east wing is reserved for family and guests. The nursery and schoolroom are in the west wing. You are never to enter the east wing without explicit instruction." "Of course." Her room was small but comfortable, with a narrow bed, a writing desk positioned beneath a window overlooking the gardens, and a small fireplace. It was luxury compared to some of her previous accommodations. "Lady Charlotte will expect you in the schoolroom tomorrow at 8 o'clock sharp. His Grace may wish to interview you himself when he returns from London, but that won't be for several weeks." After Mrs. Winters departed, Nora carefully unpacked her few belongings. From a hidden pocket sewn into her valise, she removed a small silver locket. Inside was a miniature portrait of a woman with Nora's same chestnut hair and grey eyes. Her mother, the source of her disgrace and her determination. "I will not repeat your mistakes," Nora whispered to the portrait. "Love is a luxury for those with unblemished pasts and secure futures. Not for women like us." She snapped the locket shut and tucked it beneath her chemise, close to her heart but hidden from view, just as she kept herself hidden from the world. The following morning, Nora met her charge. Lady Charlotte Stratton was a pretty child with golden curls and her father's reported blue eyes, but possessing a willful temperament that immediately tested Nora's patience. "I don't want another governess," Charlotte declared, arms crossed over her chest. "I made the last one cry." "Did you?" Nora replied evenly, arranging books on the schoolroom table. "How terribly unoriginal of you." The child's eyes widened in surprise. "You're supposed to tell me to behave." "I rather think you already know how to behave, Lady Charlotte. You simply choose not to. That's your decision, of course, but it means you'll miss today's lesson on Egyptian mummies, which is truly a pity." "I brought illustrations." Charlotte's resistance crumbled at the mention of mummies. By lunchtime, the girl was eagerly helping Nora create a timeline of ancient Egyptian dynasties, her earlier hostility forgotten. Days turned into weeks, and Nora fell into the comfortable rhythm of life at Thornfield Manor. She taught Charlotte in the mornings, supervised her play in the afternoons, and spent her evenings alone in her room, reading or writing in her journal. She took care to move quietly through the halls, to speak only when necessary, to remain a shadow in the grand house. It was precisely the life she had constructed for herself, safe, predictable, and devoid of attachments that could lead to heartbreak or, worse, exposure. She existed in the periphery of the household, exactly where she needed to be, until the November morning when everything changed. Nora was in the midst of a geography lesson when the door to the schoolroom burst open. Charlotte leapt from her chair with a squeal of delight. "Papa!" Nora rose instinctively, keeping her eyes lowered as a tall figure entered the room. Her heart hammered against her ribs. This was the moment she dreaded in every new position, when the master of the house took notice of her, assessed her, perhaps questioned her credentials, or worse, found something appealing in her appearance. "Charlotte, my darling girl, let me look at you," came a deep voice, rich with affection. "You've grown at least 3 inches since I saw you last. Papa, this is my new governess, Miss Mills. She's teaching me about the Nile River and mummies and hieroglyphics." Nora curtsied, maintaining her downcast gaze. "Your Grace." "Miss Mills," he acknowledged, his tone cooler now. "I trust my daughter is progressing in her studies." "Yes, Your Grace. Lady Charlotte has a quick mind and a particular aptitude for history." "Good. I shall want a full account of her progress. My study this evening at 8. "As you wish, Your Grace." Only after the Duke left did Nora dare to raise her eyes. She had caught merely a glimpse of a tall frame, broad shoulders, and dark hair. It was enough. The less she knew of him, the better. That evening, Nora prepared herself carefully for the interview, donning her plainest grey dress and pulling her hair into a severe knot at the nape of her neck. She would be respectful, professional, and forgettable. She would answer his questions about Charlotte's education and nothing more. The Duke's study was a masculine domain of dark wood and leather, dominated by a massive desk positioned before tall windows. The man himself stood with his back to her, gazing out at the darkened gardens. "You requested my presence, Your Grace," Nora said quietly. Duke James Stratton turned, and Nora's carefully constructed composure faltered for just a moment. He was younger than she had expected, perhaps 35, with striking features that spoke of both aristocratic breeding and genuine character. His blue eyes, so like Charlotte's, were penetrating in their intensity. "Miss Mills," he said, gesturing to a chair, "please be seated." Nora perched on the edge of the chair, hands folded in her lap, eyes fixed on a point just past the Duke's left shoulder. "Mrs. Winters speaks highly of you," he began. "She says Charlotte has shown marked improvement in both her studies and her behavior. Lady Charlotte is a bright child, Your Grace. She merely needed structure and engagement." "Indeed," he studied her for a long moment. "You are unusually young for a governess with your experience." The observation made her stomach clench with anxiety. "Personal questions were dangerous territory. I began teaching quite early, Your Grace." "So your references indicate 7 positions in 9 years. May I ask why you've changed households so frequently?" Nora had prepared for this question. "I seek to broaden my experience with different age groups and educational approaches, Your Grace." The Duke's expression remained skeptical, a commendable professional ambition, though uncommon. "Most governesses prefer stability. I find change educational in itself, Your Grace." He leaned back in his chair, regarding her with unsettling directness. "Do you know what I find curious, Miss Mills? In a house full of servants who gossip incessantly, no one seems to know anything about you. Mrs. Winters says you take your meals alone. The maids report you never join them in the servants' hall. Even Charlotte, who chatters endlessly about her lessons, can tell me nothing of the woman who teaches her, beyond your methods." Nora's heart raced, but she kept her expression neutral. "I believe a governess should be known by her results rather than her person, Your Grace." "An unusual philosophy." "Perhaps, but I find it serves the children in my care well. They focus on their studies rather than my personal history." The Duke's lips curved slightly. "Cleverly answered, Miss Mills. You reveal nothing while sounding perfectly reasonable." He rose from his chair, circling the desk to stand nearer to her. "I wonder what you're hiding." Nora rose as well, unwilling to remain seated while he loomed over her. "I hide nothing that would affect my ability to educate Lady Charlotte, Your Grace." Their eyes met fully for the first time, and something unexpected passed between them, a current of recognition, as though each sensed in the other a kindred guardedness. The Duke broke the silence first. "Very well, Miss Mills. Continue as you have been. Charlotte seems content, which is no small achievement." He moved toward the door, clearly dismissing her. "But know this, I do not tolerate secrets that might harm my daughter or this household." "I would never harm Lady Charlotte, Your Grace." "On that you have my word." As she slipped from the study, Nora drew a shaky breath. The encounter had been unsettling in ways she hadn't anticipated. Not because the Duke had been unduly suspicious, his questions were reasonable for a father concerned about his child, but because for a brief moment, when their eyes had met, she had felt seen. Truly seen, in a way she had spent years avoiding. She hurried back to her room, where she could retreat once more into blessed invisibility. The Duke remained at Thornfield for 2 weeks, during which time Nora employed every strategy she had developed over the years to avoid notice. She adjusted her schedule to use rarely trafficked corridors, took Charlotte to the far corners of the gardens for nature studies, and pleaded a headache when invited to join Sunday services in the Manor's chapel. Yet despite her efforts, she felt the Duke's awareness of her like a physical presence. Twice she entered the schoolroom to find him already there, ostensibly visiting his daughter, but with eyes that tracked Nora's movements. Once in the library where she had gone to fetch a book, assuming the room empty, he appeared from between the stacks with a volume in hand. "Miss Mills," he said, startling her. "Looking for something specific?" "A primer on astronomy, Your Grace. Lady Charlotte has expressed interest in the constellations." He reached past her to a high shelf, his arm brushing hers. The contact, though fleeting and through layers of clothing, sent an alarming warmth through her. He retrieved a slender volume and offered it to her. "This might suit. It has excellent illustrations." "Thank you, Your Grace." She accepted the book without meeting his eyes and hurried from the room, unsettled by her own reaction. That night, unable to sleep, Nora made her way to the Manor's small conservatory, a place she had discovered during her nightly wanderings. With its glass walls and ceiling, it offered an unobstructed view of the night sky, perfect for identifying constellations. She had brought the astronomy book, intending to familiarize herself with its contents before introducing it to Charlotte. "You're not as invisible as you believe, Miss Mills." The voice from the shadows sent her heart racing. The Duke emerged from a darkened corner where he had apparently been sitting in contemplation before her arrival. "Your Grace, forgive me, I didn't realize anyone was here." She clutched the book to her chest, preparing to flee. "No need to run away," he said, his voice gentler than she had heard it before. "The night sky belongs to everyone, even governesses who prefer shadows to sunlight." She hesitated, uncertain how to respond to this unexpected poeticism. "You're studying the constellations?" he asked, nodding toward the book. "Yes, for Lady Charlotte's lesson tomorrow." "You're thorough in your preparations." "I believe children deserve our best efforts, Your Grace." He moved to stand beside her, gazing upward through the glass ceiling. "Do you see Cassiopeia there, the queen in her chair?" Nora followed his pointing finger to the distinctive W-shaped constellation. "Yes." "And there Perseus, who rescued Andromeda." His hand shifted, tracing the pattern of stars. "The Greeks believed the constellations told stories of heroes and monsters, gods and mortals transformed by love or tragedy." "Or both," Nora murmured, surprising herself with the comment. The Duke glanced at her with renewed interest. "Indeed, love and tragedy often walk hand in hand in the great stories." He studied her face in the dim light. "You speak as one who has read widely." "Reading has always been my greatest comfort, Your Grace." "And your greatest escape, perhaps." The observation was too perceptive, too close to truth. Nora took a step backward. "I should return to my room, it's late." "Of course." He made no move to stop her, but his words followed her to the door. "The stars will be here tomorrow night as well, Miss Mills, should you wish to continue your studies." It was an invitation, one she had no intention of accepting. Yet the following night found her back in the conservatory, drawn not just by the stars, but by the lingering memory of a conversation that had felt, against all reason, like genuine connection. The Duke was there again, as though he had expected her return. This time he had brought 2 cups of steaming tea, one of which he offered to her without comment. "Thank you," she said, accepting the unexpected kindness with caution. They stood in companionable silence, watching the stars through the glass dome. It was he who finally spoke, his voice thoughtful. "Charlotte speaks of you constantly now. She says you make history come alive, and mathematics seem like puzzles to be solved rather than tortures to be endured." Nora smiled despite herself. She has a colorful way of expressing herself. She takes after her mother in that regard. A shadow passed over his features. "My late wife had a gift for dramatic description." "I'm sorry for your loss, Your Grace." It was 5 years ago now. He sipped his tea, eyes on the night sky. Charlotte was barely 2. She has few memories of her mother. Nora heard the regret in his voice. "That must be difficult for you both." "It is. I've tried to be both father and mother to her, but my duties often take me from home. Hence the succession of governesses. Lady Charlotte mentioned there were several before me. 5 to be precise. None lasted more than a few months. Charlotte can be challenging." Nora found herself smiling again. She tests boundaries. That's natural in a child her age, particularly one who has experienced loss. The Duke turned to study her face. "You speak from experience." The question veered too close to personal territory. Nora retreated a step. "From observation, Your Grace. Children often express their insecurities through behavior." "And what do adults do, Miss Mills? How do we express our insecurities?" "Some build walls," she answered softly before she could stop herself. "Others build empires." His eyes widened slightly at her insight. "And which have you built, I wonder?" Nora placed her empty teacup on a nearby table. "Thank you for the tea, Your Grace. I should retire now." He didn't press her to stay, but as she reached the door he spoke again. "Tomorrow night, I shall bring the telescope from the library. Saturn's rings are particularly visible this time of year." She should have declined, should have manufactured an excuse. Instead, she found herself nodding before slipping away into the darkness. Their nightly meetings in the conservatory became an unspoken ritual. The Duke brought the telescope as promised, and together they observed the planets and stars. He spoke of his travels, of the night skies above different continents, while she shared insights about Charlotte's education and development. They were careful conversations, with clear boundaries that neither crossed. He never asked directly about her past, and she never volunteered personal details. Yet something was changing between them, a gradual warming like the first thaw after winter. Nora found herself looking forward to their encounters, anticipating the rare moments when his serious expression would soften into a smile, or when their hands would briefly touch as they adjusted the telescope. It was dangerous, this growing familiarity. She knew better than to form attachments, especially to a man so far above her station, a man whose respect would evaporate if he knew the truth of her past. "You're leaving tomorrow," she said on their final night, after 2 weeks of these curious encounters. "Parliament calls," he confirmed, "though I find myself unusually reluctant to return to London." The admission hung in the air between them, weighted with unspoken meaning. "Charlotte will miss you," Nora offered a safe response. "Only Charlotte." His gaze was intent, searching. Nora looked away, focusing on adjusting the telescope. "The entire household notices your absence, Your Grace." "James, I beg your pardon. My name." "It's James." He moved closer, his hand covering hers on the telescope. "When we're alone, I'd like you to use my name." The intimacy of the request startled her. "That wouldn't be proper, Your Grace." "Few things worth experiencing are entirely proper, Miss Mills." His voice had dropped to a near whisper. "What is your given name? Your references list only N. Mills." She hesitated, aware that even this small concession was a step toward vulnerability. "Nora." "Nora," he repeated, as though tasting the syllables. "It suits you." Their eyes met, and for a breathless moment, Nora thought he might move closer still, might cross the invisible line that separated them. Part of her, a part she had long suppressed, wanted him to. Instead, he released her hand and stepped back. "I shall return for Charlotte's birthday in March. Until then, I trust you will continue your excellent work." Of course, Your Grace. He smiled slightly at her retreat to formality. Good night, Nora. After he left the next morning, the house seemed emptier, quieter, though objectively nothing had changed. Nora threw herself into Charlotte's education with renewed vigor, extending their lessons and planning elaborate projects that consumed her evenings. She did not return to the conservatory. As January gave way to February, a letter arrived bearing the Duke's seal. Nora's hands trembled slightly as she opened it, expecting perhaps instructions regarding Charlotte's education. Instead, she found a single sheet containing a carefully rendered diagram of a constellation she didn't recognize, with a note in a strong, masculine hand. I saw this in the Edinburgh sky and thought of you. The observatory at the university has a magnificent telescope. Perhaps one day you might see it for yourself. J. The letter was inappropriate, personal in a way that crossed the boundaries of their respective positions. She should burn it, forget it had ever arrived. Instead, she tucked it carefully between the pages of her journal, alongside pressed flowers and other small treasures she had collected over the years, tiny fragments of beauty in a life deliberately made austere. A week later, a package arrived containing a book on astronomy far more advanced than the one Charlotte was studying, along with another brief note, "For your continued education." The chapter on celestial navigation is particularly fascinating. J. The gifts continued, small, thoughtful tokens that spoke of attention paid to her interests and character. A volume of poetry by Elizabeth Barrett Browning. A set of colored pencils for illustrating botanical specimens. A journal bound in soft leather. Each item came with a brief note, never demanding a response yet clearly hoping for one. Nora never replied. To do so would be to acknowledge this strange correspondence, to validate feelings she dared not name. Yet each gift, each note, chipped away at the walls she had so carefully constructed around herself. In her private thoughts, she began to call him James. March arrived with unseasonable warmth and the anticipation of Charlotte's birthday. The child spoke of nothing else, counting down the days until her father's return and the promised celebration. Papa said I might have a real party this year, with children from the village and a magic show and a cake taller than me. Charlotte exclaimed one morning. That sounds wonderful, Nora replied, helping her with a particularly difficult sum. And how tall would you like this cake to be? Charlotte giggled. Taller than you, Miss Mills. Taller than Papa, even. We shall need to reinforce the floors of the ballroom, then. The girl's laughter warmed Nora's heart. Over the months, she had grown genuinely attached to Charlotte, finding in the child's spirit and intelligence a joy she had not expected when accepting the position. 2 days before the Duke's expected return, disaster struck. Charlotte, racing down the main staircase in excitement after receiving a birthday gift in advance from her grandmother, tripped and fell, tumbling down the last flight of stairs with a series of thuds that brought the entire household running. Nora reached her first, heart in her throat as she knelt beside the crumpled form. Charlotte, Charlotte, can you hear me? The child whimpered, blood flowing from a cut on her forehead. Her right arm lay at an unnatural angle. Don't move her, Mrs. Winters commanded, arriving breathless. Send for Dr. Morgan immediately. The next hours passed in a blur of activity. The doctor confirmed what they had feared. Charlotte's arm was broken, requiring setting and a cast. The child bore the painful procedure bravely, tears streaming silently down her face, as Nora held her good hand and murmured encouragements. Will Papa still come for my birthday? Charlotte asked later, drowsy from the laudanum doctor. Morgan had administered for pain. Of course he will, Nora assured her, smoothing back damp curls from the child's forehead. He wouldn't miss it for the world. Will I still have my party? Nora hesitated. Perhaps a smaller celebration while your arm heals, but just as special, I promise. Charlotte drifted off to sleep, leaving Nora with the grim task of writing to the Duke. She labored over the letter, attempting to convey both the seriousness of the accident and the fact that Charlotte would recover fully, trying to balance honesty with reassurance. The Duke arrived the following day, a full 24 hours earlier than expected, having apparently ridden through the night upon receiving her letter. Nora was at Charlotte's bedside when he burst into the room, haggard and travel-worn. "Papa," Charlotte cried, her face lighting up despite her pain. He crossed to the bed in 2 strides, gathering his daughter carefully in his arms. "My darling girl, are you terribly hurt?" "Doctor, Morgan says I was very brave," Charlotte declared proudly. "Miss Mills held my hand when he set the bone, and she didn't even mind when I squeezed too hard." The Duke's eyes met Nora's over his daughter's head. "Thank you," he mouthed silently. Nora nodded and quietly left the room, giving father and daughter privacy for their reunion. She retreated to her own chamber, expecting at any moment to be summoned to provide a full account of the accident. The summons came an hour later, delivered by a grim-faced Mrs. Winters. "His Grace wishes to see you in his study immediately, Miss Mills." Nora's stomach clenched with anxiety. Despite her best efforts to supervise Charlotte properly, the accident had occurred under her watch. The Duke would be justified in dismissing her. She made her way to the study, rehearsing explanations that felt inadequate even to her own ears. The Duke stood before the fireplace, his back to the door when she entered. "You wished to see me, Your Grace," she said quietly. He turned, and the expression on his face was not what she had expected. Rather than anger, his eyes held a depth of emotion that caught her off guard. "Nora," he said, forgetting formality entirely, "I've just heard the full account from Mrs. Winters and Dr. Morgan. You saved Charlotte from far worse injury by your quick actions." Relief weakened her knees. "I merely did what anyone would do. Dr. Morgan says you knew exactly how to position her arm to prevent further damage before he arrived. That's not common knowledge." Nora looked away. "I've had some experience with similar injuries." He crossed the room to stand before her. "You continue to surprise me, Miss Mills. Just when I think I've glimpsed the measure of you, you reveal new depths." She risked meeting his gaze. "Charlotte is recovering well. That's all that matters." "Is it?" He took her hand, an intimacy that should have shocked her but somehow felt inevitable. "I received none of your replies to my letters. I told myself you were simply being proper, maintaining appropriate distance. Yet you rushed to my daughter's aid without hesitation, held her through her pain, soothed her fears. She's a child. She needed comfort. And you're a woman who gives comfort freely to others while denying it to yourself." His thumb traced circles on her palm. "Why do you hide yourself away, Nora? What are you so afraid of?" The question struck too close to her carefully guarded truth. She tried to withdraw her hand, but he held fast. "Please, Your Grace, this isn't appropriate." "James," he corrected gently. "And you haven't answered my question." "I'm afraid of exactly this," she admitted, her voice barely audible. "Of forgetting my place, of wanting things I cannot have." His eyes softened. "And what is it you want, Nora?" The naked vulnerability of the question undid her. Tears she had held back for years threatened to spill. "It doesn't matter what I want. I am your daughter's governess." "Nothing more." "You are so much more," he countered. "You're the woman who brought my daughter back to life with your stories and your kindness. You're the shadow I find myself searching for in every room. You're the mind that challenges mine in our conversations beneath the stars." His words were everything she had secretly longed to hear, and everything she feared. "Your Grace, James, you don't know me, not truly." "Then let me know you. Tell me what you're hiding." She closed her eyes, gathering courage. "I cannot. If you knew, you would send me away, and Charlotte needs stability now more than ever." He released her hand, stepping back slightly. "I would never separate you from Charlotte without grave cause. But this half-existence you maintain, present yet hidden, seen yet not known, it cannot continue. Not when I find myself thinking of you at all hours, wondering at the woman behind the careful facade." His confession staggered her. That he should feel even a fraction of what she felt seemed impossible. "You are a duke," she reminded him, as much for her own benefit as his. "I am nobody." "You are Nora Mills," he said firmly, "and you matter to me. The rest we can address in time, if you'll only trust me enough to be honest." Trust, the very word made her tremble. Trust had betrayed her before, had led to her disgrace and exile from the life she had once known. "I need time," she whispered. He nodded, accepting her hesitation. "Then time you shall have. But know this, Nora, whatever shadows darken your past, they cannot diminish the light I see in you now." With that, he stepped away, allowing her to escape the intensity of the moment. She fled back to her room, her mind and heart in turmoil. Charlotte's birthday was celebrated quietly, with a small tea party attended by the household staff. The Duke commissioned a special cake decorated with stars and planets, a nod to his daughter's newfound interest in astronomy. Watching father and daughter together, their heads bent close as they examined the constellations rendered in sugar, Nora felt a painful longing for what could never be, a family of her own, a place of belonging. That night, unable to sleep, she returned to the conservatory for the first time since the Duke's previous visit. The stars were hidden behind clouds, the glass dome reflecting only darkness. "I thought I might find you here." She turned to find James standing in the doorway, a single candle illuminating his features. "The stars are hidden tonight," she said, stating the obvious to fill the charged silence. "Perhaps that's fitting." He placed the candle on a small table and came to stand beside her. "I've been thinking about your request for time. I respect it, but before I grant it, I need to know if there's any hope. Any possibility that you might one day trust me with whatever burden you carry." Nora stared up at the clouded glass. "Why does it matter so much to you?" "Because I find myself falling in love with a shadow, and I need to know if the woman casting it could ever love me in return." The declaration left her breathless. "You can't love me, you don't know me. I know your kindness, your intelligence, your strength. I know the way your eyes light up when Charlotte masters a difficult lesson. I know the sound of your laughter, rare though it is. I know the grace with which you move through the world, trying so hard to leave no trace." He moved closer, his voice lowering. "I know that when our hands touch, even briefly, you feel the same current that I do." He was right, and that terrified her more than anything. "James, please, you're making this impossible." "Then make it possible. Tell me what haunts you, Nora. Let me help you face it." The tenderness in his voice broke something loose inside her, a dam of secrets and fear that had held back the truth for so long. "My father was a country vicar," she began, the words coming haltingly at first. "We lived simply but well. He educated me himself, having no sons to mentor. I was 16 when he died." James remained silent, giving her space to continue her story. "My mother remarried quickly, a merchant from London who seemed kind at first. He had a son a few years older than me." Her voice faltered. "Edgar professed to love me, to want to marry me. I believed him. I was young and grieving, and desperate to feel something other than loss." Understanding dawned in James's eyes. "He took advantage of your innocence." Nora nodded, shame coloring her cheeks. "When I discovered I was with child, Edgar denied everything, said I had been with others. His father believed him, of course, and my mother." The pain, even after all these years, caught in her throat. "My mother chose her new husband's approval over her daughter's truth. I was sent away in disgrace to have the child in secret." "Your child," James said softly. "What happened?" Tears spilled down Nora's cheeks. "A daughter. Beautiful and perfect. She lived 3 days." Her voice broke. "A fever took her. I couldn't save her." James moved closer, tentatively placing his hands on her shoulders. When she didn't pull away, he drew her gently into his embrace. "I am so sorry, Nora." She allowed herself to lean into his strength, just for a moment. "Afterward, I had nothing. No family, no home, no future. A friend of my father's arranged my first position as a governess, with strict instructions that I was to reveal nothing of my past. I've been hiding ever since, moving whenever questions arose or someone looked too closely." "And that's why you avoid being seen," James said, understanding dawning. "Why you keep yourself apart. A fallen woman has no place in respectable society. If my history became known, no family would employ me. I would lose everything again." James tilted her chin up, forcing her to meet his gaze. "You are not fallen, Nora. You were betrayed by those who should have protected you. There is no shame in what happened to you. The world does not share your generous view," she said bitterly. "Then the world is wrong." His voice was fierce with conviction. "And I would stand against it for you." The declaration was so earnest, so impossible, that a bubble of near-hysterical laughter escaped her. You can't simply defy society, James. You're a duke. You have responsibilities, a position to maintain, Charlotte's future to consider. Charlotte adores you, he countered. And I, he hesitated, then continued with renewed determination. I love you, Nora. Not despite your past, but including it. Every experience, every sorrow has shaped the woman standing before me now, and it is that complete woman I have come to cherish. The words she had never expected to hear, from the man she had never allowed herself to want, shattered the last of her resistance. James, you can't know what you're saying. The scandal would be ruinous. I've weathered scandals before, he said dismissively. My marriage to Charlotte's mother raised eyebrows, the daughter of a mere baron, with no significant dowry or connections. Society gossiped for a season, then found new targets for their malice. This would be different, Nora insisted. I am ruined in the eyes of society, a governess with an illegitimate child who died. They would never accept me. Then we would create our own society, he said simply. Here at Thornfield, with Charlotte and those who truly care for us, I have no need for the approval of people whose opinions I do not respect. His certainty was both beautiful and frightening. You make it sound so simple. The decision is simple, he corrected. The execution may be more complex, but nothing worthwhile comes easily, Nora. His hand cupped her cheek. The question is whether you believe we are worthwhile. She closed her eyes, leaning into his touch. I haven't allowed myself to believe in anything for so long. Then believe in this, he whispered, and lowered his mouth to hers. The kiss was gentle at first, a tentative question. When she didn't pull away, it deepened, becoming an answer to questions she had never dared to ask. His arms encircled her waist, drawing her closer, and she found herself responding with a hunger that had lain dormant for years. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, James rested his forehead against hers. Tell me you feel nothing, and I will never speak of this again. Tell me I am alone in this, and I will respect your wishes. I can't tell you that, she admitted, her voice scarcely audible. But James, loving me will cost you dearly. Are you truly prepared for that? The only thing I am not prepared for is losing you. His eyes held hers, unwavering. The rest we will face together. Together. The word held such promise, such danger. I need to think, she said, gently extricating herself from his embrace. This is overwhelming. He nodded, releasing her without protest. Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere. She fled the conservatory, her mind spinning with possibilities she had never allowed herself to contemplate. Love, marriage, a family, a life beyond shadows, it seemed impossible. Yet the taste of his kiss lingered on her lips, a tangible reminder that the impossible had already begun to happen. 3 days passed in which Nora avoided being alone with James. She focused on Charlotte's recovery, devising games and activities the child could enjoy one-handed. If James was hurt by her withdrawal, he gave no sign, treating her with the same careful respect he always had when others were present. On the 4th day, as Nora read to Charlotte in the garden, a carriage arrived unannounced. From their position beneath an apple tree, they watched as a fashionably dressed woman descended, followed by a young man whose arrogant bearing was visible even at a distance. "Who is that, Miss Mills?" Charlotte asked, curiosity piqued. "I don't know," Nora answered truthfully, though a foreboding feeling settled in her stomach. "Perhaps friends of your father's." Papa didn't mention expecting visitors. Charlotte's nose wrinkled in disapproval. The lady has too many feathers in her hat. She looks like a bird. Despite her unease, Nora had to smile at the child's forthright assessment. It's not polite to comment on others' appearance, Lady Charlotte. Even when it's true. Especially when it's true, Nora corrected, gathering their books. Come, it's nearly time for your arithmetic lesson. They had just reached the house when Mrs. Winters intercepted them, her expression grave. "Miss Mills, His Grace requests your immediate presence in the drawing-room. Lady Charlotte is to remain with me." Charlotte protested being separated from Nora, but the housekeeper was firm. "Your father's orders, child. Now come along to the kitchen. Cook has prepared gingerbread." The prospect of sweets soothed Charlotte's objections, leaving Nora to make her way alone to the drawing-room, dread building with each step. Something in Mrs. Winter's expression had warned her that whatever awaited was not to be welcomed. She paused outside the drawing-room door, smoothing her plain grey dress and tucking a stray lock of hair back into its knot. Taking a deep breath, she knocked. "Enter," came James's voice, oddly formal. The scene that greeted her confirmed her worst fears. James stood by the fireplace, his posture rigid with tension. The woman they had observed from the garden sat on a nearby sofa, her face partly hidden behind an ornate fan. Beside her, lounging with affected casualness, was a man of about 30, handsome in a shallow way, with features Nora had hoped never to see again. Edgar, her past had found her. "Ah, the governess arrives," Edgar drawled, his gaze travelling over her with deliberate insolence. "Though I must say, she's changed considerably since our last meeting." Nora's legs threatened to give way beneath her, but she forced herself to remain standing, her back straight. "Your Grace," she acknowledged James, ignoring the others. "You sent for me." James's eyes met hers, filled with a mixture of anger and concern. "Yes, Miss Mills. It seems my guests claim a previous acquaintance with you." "Indeed," the woman interjected, snapping her fan shut. "Though she went by her mother's maiden name then, Nora Matthews, not Mills. My son Edgar was briefly engaged to her before her unfortunate indiscretion." The lie, one of many, hung in the air like poison. Nora looked directly at James, searching for some sign that he remembered her confession, that he believed her over these unexpected accusers. His expression gave nothing away. "Lady Harrington suggests that you misrepresented yourself when seeking employment here, Miss Mills." "I changed my name to secure work, Your Grace," Nora admitted, clinging to as much truth as she dared reveal in this hostile company. "As for any engagement to Mr. Harrington, no such arrangement ever existed." Edgar laughed, the sound sending chills down her spine. "Come now, Nora, there's no need for such pretense. We all know what happened. Your delicate condition, the unfortunate demise of the child." "That's enough," James interrupted sharply. To Nora's surprise, his anger seemed directed at Edgar rather than her. "Whatever Miss Mills's past may entail, it has no bearing on her excellent service to this household." Lady Harrington's eyes narrowed. "Surely you cannot mean to retain her services, Your Grace. A woman of such questionable morals, responsible for your daughter's education. It would be most improper." "I determine what is proper in my own home, Lady Harrington." James's tone was ice. "Now, perhaps you might explain the true purpose of your visit. I doubt you travelled all this way merely to malign my staff." Edgar shifted uncomfortably. "Actually, Your Grace, we came with news that might interest you. Lady Harrington's late husband was cousin to the Earl of Wentworth, whose estate borders your northern properties. There's been some question about the boundary line." "So this is about land," James interrupted flatly. "You thought to strengthen your position by discrediting my governess." Lady Harrington, at least, had the grace to look embarrassed. "We merely thought you should be informed of whom you've invited into your home, Your Grace. The decision of how to proceed is, of course, entirely yours." "Indeed it is." James moved to stand beside Nora, a gesture of support that did not go unnoticed by their visitors. "And I have decided that this conversation is at an end. Mrs. Winters will show you out." As if summoned by her name, the housekeeper appeared at the door. James nodded to her. "Lady Harrington and her son are leaving. Please see that their carriage is brought around immediately." The dismissal was unmistakable. Edgar rose, his face flushed with anger. "You'll regret this, Your Grace, when word spreads about your governess's history." "Are you threatening me, Mr. Harrington?" James's voice was dangerously quiet. "Because I assure you that would be most unwise." Edgar faltered under the Duke's cold stare. "Come, mother," he muttered, offering his arm to Lady Harrington. "His Grace clearly prefers the company of servants to his equals." They departed with as much dignity as they could muster, leaving Nora alone with James in a silence heavy with unspoken words. "I should pack my things," she said finally, unable to meet his eyes. "It would be best if I left immediately." "Is that what you think I want?" There was hurt beneath his anger now. "For you to run away? What choice do I have? They'll make good on their threats, the story will spread, your reputation." "Hang my reputation." he exploded, pacing the length of the room. Do you think I care what people like the Harringtons say about me? About us? The us caught her attention. There can be no us, James. Surely you see that now. He stopped before her, taking her hands in his. The only thing I see is that the woman I love was wounded by those people, and rather than defending herself, her first thought is to protect me and Charlotte from scandal. Tears threatened to overflow. I told you the truth would cost you. And I told you we would face it together. His grip on her hands tightened. I meant it then, and I mean it now. She shook her head, disbelieving. You would still have me, knowing that others will know my shame. There is no shame in your story, Nora, only in how you were treated. His expression softened. And yes, I would have you as my wife if you'll have me. The proposal, coming now of all moments, stole her breath. Your wife, James, you can't be serious. I have never been more serious about anything in my life. He dropped to one knee before her, still holding her hands. Nora Mills, or Matthews, or whatever name you choose, I love you. I want to build a life with you, to raise Charlotte together, perhaps to have more children if you wish it. I want to wake each morning to your smile and fall asleep each night with you in my arms. Will you marry me? The world seemed to stop around them. In that suspended moment, Nora saw two paths before her, continued flight and hiding, or the courage to step into the light and claim the happiness being offered. They will talk, she whispered. They will say terrible things about both of us. Let them talk, he replied simply. We'll be too busy being happy to listen. A laugh bubbled up through her tears. You make the impossible sound so simple. Love is simple, he countered. It's fear that complicates matters, and I am tired of letting fear dictate our choices, aren't you? She was. God, how tired she was of hiding, of being less than herself, of denying her heart what it wanted most. Yes, she said, the single syllable holding all her hope and fear and longing. Yes, I'll marry you, James. He rose, gathering her into his arms for a kiss that felt like coming home after a lifetime of wandering. When they broke apart, he pressed his forehead to hers. We'll face whatever comes together, Nora. No more shadows. No more shadows, she agreed, and for the first time in years she felt truly seen. The scandal, when it came, was every bit as vicious as Nora had feared. Lady Harrington wasted no time in spreading the story of the Duke's governess and her sordid past. The gossip columns hinted at impropriety, suggesting that the Duke's interest in his daughter's caretaker was of long-standing and dubious nature. But James was as good as his word. He faced the whispers with unwavering dignity, neither confirming nor denying the specifics of Nora's history, but making it clear through his actions that whoever dared to insult his future Duchess would find themselves unwelcome in his home and his business dealings. Charlotte, when told a simplified version of events, that Miss Mills would be becoming her new mother, reacted with joy rather than confusion. Does this mean you won't be invisible anymore? She asked Nora. What do you mean, darling? You always try to hide, Charlotte explained with a child's directness. You walk so quietly and sit in corners and never want anyone to look at you. But Papa looks at you all the time, even when you don't notice. And I do too, we see you. Tears filled Nora's eyes as she gathered the child into her arms. Yes, my love. I won't be invisible anymore. They were married in the Thornfield chapel 2 months later, a quiet ceremony attended only by the household staff and a few of James's most loyal friends. Nora wore a gown of pale blue rather than traditional white, a nod to her past that James had suggested himself. No more hiding, he had said when presenting her with the fabric. No more shame. As she walked down the aisle toward him, Nora felt the last of her shadows fall away. In their place was something brighter and stronger, a love built on truth, acceptance, and the courage to be fully seen. Later that evening, as they stood in the conservatory beneath a canopy of stars, James placed a small velvet box in her hand. Inside was a locket similar to the one she had kept hidden all these years, but newer, finer. Open it, he encouraged. Inside was a miniature portrait of a baby girl, painted from Nora's description of her lost daughter. On the opposite side was a lock of Charlotte's golden hair. So you can carry them both close to your heart, James explained, his voice gentle. the daughter of your body and the daughter of your heart. Nora closed her fingers around the precious gift, unable to speak through her tears. James gathered her close, understanding her silence. You once told me that love is a luxury for those with unblemished pasts and secure futures, he murmured against her hair. But you were wrong, my love. It's not a luxury, it's a necessity. And it belongs to all of us, especially those who have known its absence. As they stood together beneath the vast, star-filled sky, Nora finally understood that true invisibility had never been about hiding herself from the world. It had been about failing to see her own worth, her own right to happiness. No longer. Now in James's arms, with Charlotte's laughter echoing from the house behind them and the future stretching bright before them, Nora Mills Stratton, Duchess of Thornfield, was finally completely seen. And loved not despite her past, but including it, every shadow, every sorrow, every step of the journey that had brought her home.